Hello everyone, and Samuel here. Today we're going to be learning something that will help us solidify our understanding of Rust and then make us understand how to use Rust to build a basic project. So if you're new to Rust, we already have a comprehensive tutorial on how to use Rust, and I recommend that you go back and watch that video before you proceed with this, because this is going to be a project-based tutorial and we're not going to go back to the basics, but we are going to touch a lot of things that we already touched from the basics, so you can have more deeper understanding of how to use them for a real world project. I'm going to create a project now, and we're going to name our project Rust Students Management System, and let's open that project on our VS Code. Yeah, so that is opened, and of course, when we cargo run this, it's going to try to run the project. But first, let's go on and install that. Sorry, we have to switch into that project, and then we can actually cargo run, which is going to actually install it and also compile that, and we just get the basic hello world that usually comes with it. So we're going to start by creating a struct named students, and inside the struct we're going to have a name, we're going to have an age, which is going to be an unsigned integer of 64 bits, and then we are going to have grades, which is going to be a vec of floating points, 64 bits as well. So with that, we're going to use the derive keyword to add certain behavior to our struct. So the first one we're going to add is the debug, and we're also going to add clone. So with the help of the debug, we can actually print, let's say we want to print the data inside the struct, we can actually print it out, and with the help of the clone, we can actually clone this struct. So I'm going to implement a block for the students, and we're going to have some couple of functions, which is going to be new, just to create new students, and we're also going to have for average grades, just to calculate the average grade of each student. So for the new, of course, we have the string, we have the age, so we are using the same data types, and then we have the grades, which is going to be a vec, not just that, so f64, and we just want to return back that students, and of course, we just pass down our structs, then we pass the argument down. Then we have for the average grade, you already understand we have grades here, so with the help of self we can borrow that value, and then we're just gonna return the grades, the average. So let's do some calculation here. So total is going to be self dot grades, so we iterate inside that, and then we sum it up. So total divide, which is going to return the total divided by self dot grades dot length, and then that should be it. But because we are returning a floating point, so we're just gonna say this as f64, and let's also say this is f64. Beneath this implementation block, we are going to add some functions which we are going to be working on. So we have add students. For us to be able to add students, then display students, we want to actually see the students that we displayed, and we're also going to create two functions for record keeping. So we have the save file, which is going to help us to record the file, record the students on the file, and also the load from file in order for us to read the contents of the file and update it. So to ensure that we add students, we are going to let me just give you an example of how the data is going to be like. So we are going to use something called hash maps, and inside this hash map we usually insert a key and a pair. So the key can be the key of the value, and then the value is going to be attached to the key. So right here I'm going to create students, and I'm going to use the mutate because we're going to be passing down existing student in case we have previous students from our file. And as you know, this is going to be a hash map of a key, and the pair is going to be student, the key value rather, not the key pair. So the way we're going to be adding student is going to be from our command line. So for us to have access to our command line, we use something called the standard input. But before we get there, we're going to be getting the name from our command line, and we're going to be getting the age as well. And as you know as well, we're going to be getting the grades. So the grades is going to also be a string, but at the right time we're going to make sure that we convert everything to fit perfectly. So let's just like print something to the user and then encourage the user to enter a student name. So let's say enter student's name, and from the inputs, outputs from the standard library of Rust, we have to read line, and inside this read line we attach the value given to us to the name. So the first one is going to be name, and then we use unwrap. So the unwrap is going to ensure that if we like have an error, we get to catch that error and know what is the reason for that error. So we can actually duplicate this too, so that we can speed up things. So we have the age, and lastly we have the grades. Enter student grades, and then we have enter student age. Then for the grade itself, let's say separated by space, because we are gonna like split that and get each of these grades and update it properly. Now we're gonna start by creating a student. So let me say students, then we use our new struct, and we can pass the age, the name. So for the name, I have to trim that to ensure that we have remove white space and ensure that it's a string. And then we have the age and also the grades. Then we can actually let's say students dot name dot clone, and then we pass down the students. So this is a student, so the error for this goes away. So we are getting an error here because the types, the data types are not yet the same. So I'm gonna come up here and change this as a 32-bit integer, and we are still getting an error because we have some couple of things to do. So we have to pass input values. So age is going to be age.trim dot pass instead. So we have to unwrap in case we get a data that does not fit into it, and then we can say this is a U32 bits. And then for the grades as well, so we have to ensure that each grade that we are passed is actually able to pass to an int. So the way we can do that is to map through that grade, or let's map through the grades instead of iterating through it. So we can say sorry for these recommendations. We can split white space and then we map through it. So with the help of the closure, we are able to access each grades. So we can say grades.parse and then unwrap in case we get any number that we are not able to pass, and then we kind of create a new data from that, and we get that fixed. So this is giving us, I think the data type is not the same thing. This is U32, not U64, and I think the error should go away. So right now we are done with adding data for the students, and the last thing we can do is to print line students added successfully. So we are done with adding a student. So this is add student, not add students. So if we want to display the students, we just have to like pass down the students right here, and you know it's gonna be a borrowed data. So we have the string of a student. So I keep making a lot of mistakes. So we can loop through, and we have the name, and then we have the student itself. So in students, so we just want to print line. I'm gonna break this down, add our placeholder. So that will be the name of the students, and then the age of the students, which is going to be another placeholder, and then the average grade for that student. So let's use caps. So I only want to display just two decimal places from that grade. In case we have like 1.555, we just want to display like 1.55. And then of course we have the name, and then we have the student.age. Yeah, because we already have the name there. And then lastly we have the students dot average grade. So in this case we are not gonna return the, okay, even if we have grade there, we're not gonna return that. We have to just use the function and return the average grade of that student. So let's go on to use the add student and also the display students. So I'm just gonna come here and create students, which is going to be a hash map. So I'm just gonna initialize an empty hash map. So I'm just going to initialize one more thing, an infinite loop. So with the help of that, we want to like use pattern matching to match a particular thing and then call a particular function. So I'm just gonna paste this down, the name of the file, the name of the project, which is the student management system. So we have some things we want to use pattern matching for. So we have 1 for adding a student, 2 for displaying a student, and 3 for save and exist, which is going to help us to save that on a particular file. So in order for us to get what we are going to use for pattern matching, we are going to get it from our terminal. So let me create a choice, which is going to be a new string, and then with the input outputs we're going to get the inputs and then read line. This is supposed to be double, so we have underscore read line, and then we have mute choice dot unwrap. So we can match that choice using our pattern matching, and let's ensure that we trim that to remove any unnecessary white spaces. So right here, if we have 1, we are going to display something, or we are going to call a function. And so let's call the add student right here, which is going to accept the student, but here we are going to borrow the students, and we're going to make sure that it's mutable. So let's save. I think what are we getting wrong here? This is supposed to be mute instead of just immutable variable. And one more thing, let me sort of add this and see if that is the reason. So we can print line invalid choice. So let's say, yeah, so we just have to add like a default callback to it to ensure that if we put in the wrong value we get an invalid choice, but this keeps on running and running until we put in the right choice. So we have 2, which is going to be display students, and I think we also pass down the student here. So right now if we go on and run this cargo run, so you could see we have add the students, display students, display all students, save and exist. So if I put 1 here, it's going to start requesting for everything that we put down here. So you have enter student's name. So I'm just gonna use Bob, for example. Bob is 20 years old, and Bob has grade of 10, 20 and 30. So after that, it brings us back to enter a choice, which is going to be display all students, and when we put 2, you could see it displays Bob and then the average grade of Bob. So we're gonna use the third function, which is going to be the save file, because we want to make sure that every record we are putting down here is being stored perfectly. So I'm gonna put down student here, and as usual, it's a hash map with a string of students, and this is going to return an input output results. So we just have to put a parenthesis there. So if you are coming from our crash course, you probably understand how to create files. So this is not going to be a big deal for you. But if it's a big deal for you, please refer back to our course and you will have more understanding. So we're going to create a file, and we're going to create a file from a file name. So let me just put this down first. File.create. So I think we have to import that file from Rust, and then we have the file name. So the file name is just going to be a basic string, and we just have to put an OK to get rid of that error. So that gets rid of that squiggly line or red line. So what we're gonna do next is to loop through each students and then store it, write it inside our file. So for name and students, in students. So we're just gonna use the right line, and let me just break this down. So we have the file we want to create, and then we have, of course, you know, we have name, age, and the grade. So this grade is going to be like it's not just a string, so it's just gonna be like an array of grades. So we have the students dot name, students dot age, and students dot grades. So after that, we just have to display on our command line and say data saved to file, and that is it. So right here, we are not supposed to get that error because I think it's because we are not catching an error. So let's say if the file fails to create, should we do something else here? Yeah, so what we just have to do is to bring in the input and then pass down the self and also the write. So with the help of the write, we're able to write to that particular file. So for us to now make use of this save to file, we just have to like come down to right here, and we change this to 3. Remember, we have 3 as save to file, and then after we save to file, we are gonna exist from that. So let's change this. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna like bring in a new block, and inside this block, let's say save students to the file before exiting. So we have save to file, which is going to accept students, and then the file name, which is going to be students.txt, and then we unwrap to catch any possible error, and after that we just break out of that loop. So always remember that this is an infinite loop and it keeps on running unless we break out of it. And then what we can do is now to run the codes. So let's cargo run this. So let's add a new student called Bob. So Bob is 20, we have 10, 10, and 10. And then when we just choose 3 and hit enter, it's going to create the student file for us. And inside the students file, we get Bob and also the grades of Bob. So right now, what this can actually do is to create one data for a particular student inside our students file, but you know we have to create like multiple data, and for us to achieve that, we have to now write some functionality inside our load from file. So for the load file, what we're gonna do is to come here, we are going to change this to load file, and we are just going to pass the name of the file name, which is students.txt, and then we save. So what I'm going to do is to return a hash map here of string and students, and right here we have the file name, which is just a string, and inside here I can say let's mute of students equals a new hash map, and then I can return that student. I think that should drive away the error. Well, it shouldn't, because no, it should actually drive out the error. Okay, yeah, it should, because we added we closed out this, and this is not supposed to be giving us an error. We have students equals to, so we didn't add the equal sign, so that's why we got that red line. So right now we connected our students to this load file. So there's some couple of things we are going to do in this load file. First of all is to open the file we're trying to use, and then we read through each of these lines and we ensure that the data are passed correctly, and then we also then we use each of the data return and then populate it into the student using the name as the key and the student's data as the value of that key. So let's go on and do that quickly. I'm going to quickly declare a file and open options, and I think it's called read, yeah, and then we open that file name, and then we already have our mutable student. So let's use file. Let's ensure that file was returned into this file, and let's read the contents of that file. Then we looked through each line in the reader. So we have reader.lines, and if let's then we get each of this line as data. So each of this line as data, it's going to be each of this line right here. So we just have to rename it as data. So let's get the parts, which is going to be splitted by the comma. So right now we have the name, which is going to be part 0, and as usual we have to trim that, and then we ensure it's a string. So let's save, and I think what are we getting wrong here? Let me kind of assign it a vec of string and see if that's, yeah. So it wanted us to just infer the type on it directly. And then we have the age, which is going to be parts 1 dot trim dot parse, and then we unwrap to catch any possible errors. And then we also have the grade. So what we're going to do with the grades, we are going to replace these blocks of array. I think this is a U32. So we have the grade string, and then we say part 2 dots. So we want to replace the first with an empty string, and then replace the second one with an empty string. And then we can say grades. We want to convert each of these grades to a number to ensure it's a number, and then we return it as a new vec itself. So we are going to return a new vec of f64, which is going to be grade string. So let's break this down, and then we remove any white space attached to it, and then we use the closure. So for each grade, we are going to return grade.parse. Sorry, this is g.parse, and then we unwrap to get any possible error, and then we collect that back to a new vec. So this should be fine. So now let's create a student using each of the key, and then we already have each of the values. So we have students, which is going to be a new student. So right here we can pass name, which is going to clone the name, and then of course we have the age and the grades, and then we have the student dot from the student we can clone the name as well. Students on insert, so we have the students dot name dot clone. I think, okay, we don't actually need to clone the name because right now we are still in the same loop, so we can still use this directly and then just pass the students and to still work fine. So with that done, all we just have to do is to come down and let's check the if statements. So we have to print line and say data loaded from file. So in case there was no data loaded from file, you can just say print line no existing file found. So it's gonna start a fresh file for us, and then we return that student. So remember, we are just referencing that student inside this loop, then using the name as the key and the student record as the value for that key. So with that done, I think we are done with loading our file, and let's go on to test it out. So we already have made use of our file, so let me just I think we can bring this in if it's possible now. We can just say hash map, yeah, and this will help us arrange that. So let's go on and run our code. So right now we already have Bob inside our file, and we are gonna add Alice. So I'm gonna add Alice. Alice is 14 years of age, and Alice has 5, 2, 6, and 7 as the grades. And what we're gonna do is to save. So when we save this, we can see that Alice has been added into our file. So that's it for the tutorial. But before we end, I will always encourage you to like try out many things in Rust. You will have more understanding of how to use Rust. So Rust is a very cool language. I like it a lot because it kind of helps you decrease the errors when you're writing your codes. You tend to focus on being more efficient, more productive, and more results driven in Rust than many other programming languages. So this is so far we have come, and if you've come this far, do hit that like button and also subscribe to our channel, and let's see you next time. Bye bye.